The hostess at the front door had a practiced smile, the kind that stayed perfectly still while her eyes did all the work. She looked at the man, then at the crutches, then at the little girl standing beside him, her hand tucked into the pocket of his jacket because she was too old to hold hands in public, but still young enough to need the contact. "Do you have a reservation?" the hostess asked. Her voice was careful, measured. The way a person speaks when they've already decided the answer. "Granger," he said. "Table for two." She looked down at the tablet, scrolled, looked up again. "I see it," she said, and her smile didn't change. But something behind her eyes shifted. "He actually has one. Right this way." Her name was Ethan Cole, 37. He'd been called a lot of things in the last 4 years: disability claimant, single father, the man who used to be somebody. None of those things were accurate. None of them were wrong. His daughter walked beside him, Lily, 8 years old. She was wearing her good dress, the navy one with the white collar that she'd chosen herself, very seriously, from the back of her closet that morning. She'd pressed it with the iron under supervision. She'd polished her shoes with a paper towel because they didn't own shoe polish. She was taking this seriously. That was why he was here. He'd seen the flyer Whitmore Grand Hotel, Annual Business Innovation Gala, taped to the bulletin board at the public library 3 weeks ago. He'd noticed it because he recognized the venue. He'd been inside it once before, years ago, for a different reason entirely. He hadn't thought about that in a long time, but Lily had been asking for weeks to eat somewhere with tablecloths. She'd seen it in a book, a picture of a white-clothed table, with a candle in the center, bread rolls in a basket. And she'd pointed at it and said, "That looks like somewhere important things happen." He'd called the hotel. The prix fixe was $200 a plate. He'd said he needed a table for two. The woman on the phone had paused. "This is a business gala, sir. Are you affiliated with any of the attending companies?" "I'm a private reservation," he said. Another pause. "Of course. Let me check availability." They had a table in the back, far from the main floor, near the kitchen. He'd taken it. Now the hostess was leading them through a room full of people in suits that cost more than his monthly rent. Crystal glasses, low voices, the discreet click of silverware against fine china. Someone laughed, that particular kind of laugh that fills a space easily, without effort, because the person doing it has never worried about whether there was room for them. He walked steadily. The crutches were carbon fiber, black, the good kind. He'd saved 8 months for them. They barely made a sound on the marble floor. Lily walked beside him with her chin up. She'd learned that from him. He'd learned it from necessity. The table in the back turned out to be taken. "A mix-up," the hostess said. "Apologetic in the way that isn't apologetic." There was another table available, but it was she gestured across the room. "The main floor, near the center, next to the reserved section." "That's fine," Ethan said. He crossed the room. He felt the looks. He'd stopped tracking them individually years ago. There were too many, and they blurred together. And the only one that ever mattered was the small face beside him. Checking whether he looked okay, whether he was embarrassed, whether she should be embarrassed. He wasn't. So she wasn't. There was a moment, halfway across the floor, when a man in a dark suit stepped slightly into their path, not intentionally, or maybe intentionally, the kind of obstruction that lets the person doing it claim it wasn't. Ethan adjusted his line of travel, kept his pace. The man looked down at the crutches and then away, with the expression people get when they've done something and immediately know it. Lily walked past without looking at the man. That was something he'd tried to teach her, that giving people the dignity of your attention was a choice, not an obligation. She'd understood it better than he'd expected. Children understood things you didn't always have language for, if you modeled them long enough. He pulled out her chair first. Then he hooked his crutches over the edge of the table. The rubber tips settled against the white linen. He sat down, adjusted his left leg, the one that didn't bend all the way anymore, and picked up the menu. "What's amuse-bouche?" Lily asked, reading carefully. "A small bite before the meal," he said. To prepare your palate. What's a palate? Your ability to taste things. She considered this. I think mine is already prepared. Probably, he said. A waiter appeared. Young, well-trained, his neutrality almost perfect. Almost. He handed Lily a menu and looked at Ethan slightly too long before looking away. Can I start you with still or sparkling water? He asked the center of the table. Still, Ethan said. Please. Lily touched the edge of her fork. She was counting the pieces of silverware. He watched her do it. Without watching her do it, a skill every single parent develops in the first 6 months. She looked up. This is very nice, Dad, she said seriously. It is, he said. 40 minutes later, the table beside theirs was still mostly empty. The reserved section occupied a shallow platform at the center of the room, 3 steps up, velvet rope, the kind of arrangement that announced itself without a sign. The main table seated 12. By 7:15, 11 of the 12 seats were filled with people whose names were mentioned in quarterly reports. The last seat was at the head of the long side, facing the room. It was taken at 7:22. Ethan knew the time because Lily had asked him what time it was when the room shifted, that subtle tectonic thing that happens when a person of consequence enters a space, when conversations pause for a fraction of a second and then resume at a slightly different angle, the way plants lean toward light. He didn't look up right away. He was explaining to Lily the difference between a fish fork and a salad fork, which she was taking in with the focused seriousness of someone learning something that would be useful later. When he did look up, it was because the room had gotten quieter than it should have. A woman. 40, or close to it. Dark blazer. Hair pulled back. She moved through the room like someone who had learned a long time ago that pausing created problems, so she never did. The 12 people at the main table straightened slightly as she passed them, even the ones she didn't acknowledge. She sat down. Her name, Ethan, would learn later, though he already knew it was Victoria Harlan, CEO of Harlan Meridian Group, the 3rd largest private infrastructure firm on the East Coast. On her right, her chief of operations. On her left, an empty chair that turned out to belong to someone who never arrived. She ordered water, opened a folder, read without looking up. Ethan looked back at his daughter. Salad fork, he said, pointing. Smaller. Outside edge. Why outside? You use it first. The silverware works from the outside in. That's weird, she said. It's a system, he said. Weird and systems aren't mutually exclusive. She smiled. She had a smile that started on one side before the other, slightly crooked, the same way her mother's had been. He didn't think about that often. Tonight, in this room, with the candlelight, he noticed it. 20 minutes passed. The first course came. Lily ate the amuse-bouche in one serious bite and declared her palate prepared. The room talked around them. The reserved table murmured business, laughter, strategy. Then the maitre d' appeared. He was a compact man in his late 50s, and he had the particular posture of someone who had spent decades enforcing invisible rules. He stopped beside Ethan's table. Sir, he said. Ethan looked up. I'm afraid there's been a seating configuration issue this evening. Your table has been reserved for a party that is arriving late. The man's expression was carefully blank. We'll need to move you. Where? Ethan asked. We have a table available near the kitchen, Ethan said. The maitre d' didn't answer. Which was an answer. Ethan looked at Lily. She was looking at her soup, very still. Her spoon was resting on the rim of the bowl, exactly as he'd shown her. We've already started our meal, he said. Of course, and we apologize for the... Is the party arriving late a confirmed reservation or a possibility? A pause. Sir, because if it's a possibility, I'd like to finish the first course before making a decision. Another pause. The maitre d' glanced toward the reserved section. Someone there was watching, not Victoria Harlan, who was still reading, but a man beside her, wide and self-important, who had the expression of someone who considers themselves a participant in all nearby situations. I'll need to check, the maitre d' said. Thank you, Ethan said. The man left. Lily looked up. She'd heard all of it. Are we being moved? She asked. I don't know yet, he said. Because of your crutches? He looked at her directly. No, he said. Because some people think that having more money means having more right to be somewhere. They're wrong. You should know that. She looked at him for a moment. Okay, she said, and picked up her spoon. The maitre d' came back 10 minutes later and said the late reservation had cancelled. He was tighter now, more formal, the social calculation having run its course in a way that didn't favor the move. Please enjoy your evening, he said, and retreated. The man on the reserved platform, who had been watching, lost interest. Conversations restarted. Ethan exhaled. Very slightly. Lily noticed. She didn't say anything. She reached across the table and straightened the salt shaker, which didn't need straightening. The main course arrived. Duck for him, the pasta for Lily, which she'd chosen with great deliberation after reading each option twice. The waiter was warmer now, a fractional opening, the adjustment people make when they've misjudged someone. It was mid-course when it happened. One of the chairs at the reserved table was pushed back, the empty one, the one that had been vacant all evening. Not the late cancellation, a different seat, adjacent to Victoria Harlan's. Someone had apparently claimed it. Someone who'd been circulating, and now, between conversations, settled into the nearest open seat. Ethan didn't look. He was watching Lily decide whether to eat the cherry tomato garnish. The garnish is decorative, he said. But edible? Probably. So I can eat it? You can eat anything on your plate. She ate the tomato. The table beside them had shifted slightly with the addition of the new arrival, conversations redistributing. And in the movement, Ethan's table had been drawn slightly into the orbit of the main floor. He was closer to the reserve section now than he'd intended. He didn't think about it. He was cutting the duck when a silence moved across the reserved table. Not the silence of a conversation ending. The silence of a person stopping mid-motion. He looked up. Reflex. Victoria Harlan was looking at him, not at his table. At him. At his face. She was holding a glass of wine, white, half-raised, and she had stopped. The glass hung at shoulder height. Her other hand was flat on the table. The conversation on her right continued for 3 seconds before the man speaking trailed off. Having noticed that she wasn't listening, she was very still. Her expression was not readable. That was the thing. It was the face of someone whose mind had just done something that their body hadn't caught up to yet. A processing expression. A recognition expression. She set the glass down. Slowly. Without looking at it, Ethan looked at her for 2 seconds. Then he looked at his daughter. Then at his plate. He was aware, in his peripheral vision, that she hadn't looked away. Lily looked up from her pasta. She looked at the woman. Then at her father. Dad, she said, very quietly. I see it, he said, equally quietly. Do you know her? He didn't answer immediately. He set down his fork, picked up his water glass, took a measured sip. A long time ago, he said. I knew someone who knew her. That's not the same as knowing her. No, he agreed. It isn't. Across the platform, Victoria Harlan said something to the man on her right. He leaned in. She said it again. He shook his head, not understanding. And she straightened up. Something moving across her face that looked very much like a person deciding something. She stood up. She said something to the table brief. Contained and walked down the 3 steps from the platform. She was crossing the room. Lily set down her fork and watched openly, the way children do, without the learned pretense of not looking. Ethan didn't look up. He heard her stop beside his table. Excuse me, she said. Her voice was different in person than he'd imagined it would be. Steadier than her expression had suggested. He looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Close up, he could see what the distance had hidden: the slight pallor, the controlled steadiness of a person holding something in. Her jaw was set. Her hands were at her sides. Ethan, she said. Not a question. Miss Harlan, he said. Lily looked between them. She had gone very still. Victoria Harlan took a breath. I wasn't sure, she said. I thought for a second. I thought I was wrong. You're not, he said. She stood there. Something in her face did something complicated. and then went still again. "You're alive," she said. The words came out quieter than she'd intended. The man at the nearest occupied table glanced over. She didn't notice. "I am," Ethan said. It was the man on the platform who caused the problem. His name was Caldwell, Drew Caldwell, VP of External Relations at a firm that had sent 2 representatives to the gala. He was 45, and he wore his suits like armor, and he had the quality of someone who managed people by making them aware of the cost of his attention. He'd watched Victoria Harlan walk off the platform with an expression that started as annoyance and sharpened into something else. He came down the steps now, unhurried. The way a man moves when he's decided the situation requires management. "Victoria," he said, not loudly. The tone of someone correcting a deviation. She didn't look at him. "Is there an issue?" he asked. "No," she said. He looked at the table, at Ethan, at the crutches, at Lily, who looked back at him with the clear, unblinking gaze of a child who has no social reason to look away. "I don't think we've been introduced," Caldwell said to Ethan. His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. "No," Ethan agreed. "We haven't. This section of the floor is—" "He's not in the section," Victoria said. "He's at his own table." Caldwell paused. He recalibrated. "Of course. I only meant, Drew," she said. She said it the way you stop a sentence. He stopped. She looked back at Ethan. She pulled out the chair across from him, not asking, but pausing long enough to make the pause a question. "Do you mind?" she asked. He looked at Lily. Lily had picked up her fork again and was eating pasta with the focused attention of someone who is definitely paying attention to the conversation. "You can sit down," Ethan said. She sat. Caldwell stood there for a moment longer. He looked at Victoria, who was not looking at him, and then at Ethan, and then at something unspecified that let him conclude he was the one making a scene by continuing to stand there. He went back to the platform. The waiter materialized. Victoria waved him off. He vanished. She looked across the table at Ethan. "I heard you were dead," she said. "I know," he said. "There was a report. The hospital. There was a complication. After." He said it flatly, without drama. "I was transferred. It took a long time." "How long?" 14 months, he said. "In the facility." She was quiet. She looked at his hands on the table. At the left one, which had a scar along the outer edge, long and silver. "I tried to find you," she said. "When things settled, I reached out to your family. My sister told me. You knew she'd contacted us? She told me you'd called." Several times. Something moved across Victoria's face. "And you didn't?" "No," he said. A pause. "Why?" she asked. He considered. He turned his water glass a quarter turn, because at the time, he said slowly, "I was a man with one working leg, a 14-month hospital debt, and a 4-year-old daughter. What would I have asked you for?" She didn't answer. "I wasn't in a position to accept anything gracefully," he said. "And I didn't want it any other way." Lily had finished her pasta. She was now looking at her father, with the clear-eyed attention of a child who understands tone of voice better than she understands words. "Is she?" Victoria started. "My daughter," he said. "Lily." Victoria looked at Lily for a moment. Something shifted in her expression. Not pity. Something older and more complicated than pity. "Hi, Lily," she said. "Hi," Lily said. She paused. "Are you a friend of my dad's?" Victoria opened her mouth, closed it. "We used to know each other," she said, finally. "He said that too," Lily said. "That's a confusing thing to say." Victoria looked back at Ethan. Despite everything, something in her face softened. "She's direct," she said. "She has that quality," he agreed. Caldwell came back with reinforcements. Not literally, but with the particular social momentum that comes from two people agreeing that something is an inconvenience and deciding to do something about it. The second man was Gregory Fitch. He ran a hospitality group and had the practiced ease of someone who had spent his career deciding who belonged in rooms. "Victoria," Fitch said, with the warmth of someone who was going to be very reasonable. "We're about to start the keynote." They're looking for you at the main table. I'm aware, she said. She didn't move. Fitch looked at Ethan, a long look, evaluative. I don't believe we've met, he said, extending his hand. It was the kind of handshake offer that's also a test. Are you someone I should know? Ethan looked at the hand. He shook it. Ethan Cole, he said. The name didn't register. Fitch nodded, sociably. Which meant Ethan Cole meant nothing to him. Fitch, he said. Horizon's Hospitality. Are you presenting tonight? No, Ethan said. Representing a firm? No. Fitch's smile adjusted. I see. He looked at Victoria again. The keynote is in 8 minutes. I'll be there, she said. Of course. He smiled at Ethan, the smile of a man who has achieved something without saying anything, and turned away. Victoria looked at the tablecloth for a moment. That name still does nothing for you, she said quietly. It wasn't a complaint. It was more like noting the arithmetic of something. Most names don't, Ethan said. Yours did something for this room, 4 years ago, she said, in a different context. He didn't respond to that. Lily had been watching the exchange between her father and the two men with the focused expression she got when she was cataloging something. She leaned slightly toward her father now. They want her to leave, she said, not lowering her voice. Lily, he said, a quiet note of correction. Sorry, she said. Then, after a beat. But they do. Victoria looked at the girl. A small sound came from her, not quite a laugh, but something in that direction. Your father was like that too, she said. When he was right about something, he just said it. Lily looked at her father, checking this information against available data. He still does that, she said. I'm sitting right here, Ethan said. Lily looked at him. I know, she said. Victoria's phone buzzed. She looked at it. Put it face down. The night of the collapse, she said. Her voice had changed. Lower. More careful. I've thought about telling you, if I ever found you, what I would say. You don't have to say it tonight, he said. I know I don't have to. She looked at him directly. I want to. He was quiet. You were in a building you had no professional obligation to enter, she said. The structural report was preliminary. The evacuation order hadn't come through yet. Our entire site team had already pulled back. You went back in because there were 2 contractors still on the 4th floor, he said. They hadn't heard the radio call. They were alive because of you. They were alive, he said. Flat, no inflection. The way he said things he'd practiced not putting weight on. And you were in the hospital for 14 months, he said. Yes, I'm aware. She looked at him. I was going to say, she said quietly, that you were the only reason my company survived the legal aftermath. The 2 contractors, the testimony they gave, about the conditions, about what they'd observed, it would have been catastrophic without the context of what happened, of why they were still in the building, of what changed the sequence of events. He looked at the table. The report concluded the collapse was due to a supplier defect, she continued. Something we hadn't caught. Something that, frankly, our oversight should have caught sooner. That finding and the testimony that contextualized it changed the liability determination. The difference was measured in 9 figures. He didn't say anything, and I couldn't find you, she said. I couldn't even tell them you're sorry, Lily said. They both looked at her. She was looking at Victoria with perfect calm. That's what you're trying to do, Lily said. You don't have to say all the other stuff first. He already knows the story. Just say you're sorry. Silence. Victoria Harlan, CEO, person of consequence, woman who hadn't apologized in a professional context in 11 years, looked at a child who had just told her to stop building towards something, and simply say it. She turned to Ethan. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry I didn't find you. I'm sorry it took this long. I'm sorry for what it cost you. He was quiet for a long moment. Okay, he said. Not forgiveness, not absolution. Just, I've received what you said. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied, and picked up the dessert menu. Caldwell had been watching from the platform. He'd seen Victoria sit down. He'd watched the conversation. He hadn't heard it, the room was too loud, and Victoria's voice was controlled, but he'd seen the body language, and he'd read it the way men like Caldwell read situations they want to resolve. He came down the steps a third time. This time, he brought the maitre d'. "I apologize for the interruption," Caldwell said, looking at Ethan. Not at Victoria. At Ethan. "I need to ask, are you a registered guest of the gala this evening?" "I'm a paying dinner reservation," Ethan said. "This floor is reserved for gala participants. This table isn't in the gala section." "The floor, sir. The entire floor. That wasn't communicated when I made my reservation." The maitre d' shifted. He'd been involved in the earlier exchange about the table, and he had the look of a man who was tired of being used as an instrument. "Sir," the maitre d' said, "I apologize for any miscommunication. I'd like to finish my dinner." Ethan said, quietly, "I have a second course coming. And my daughter hasn't had dessert yet." Caldwell looked at Lily. It was a brief look. Dismissive. Perhaps the young lady would prefer. "Don't," Ethan said. The word was small, very quiet, but it stopped Caldwell mid-sentence with a precision that surprised the maitre d' and the two people at the nearest table who were pretending not to listen. "I'm having dinner with my daughter," Ethan said. "I made a reservation. I paid for it. I've been polite. I've stayed at my table. I've complied with every request this establishment has made." He paused. "I'd like you to tell me what rule, specifically, I'm breaking." Caldwell opened his mouth. "A specific rule," Ethan said. "Not an atmosphere, not a vibe. A rule." The maitre d' looked at the ceiling with the expression of a man mentally composing a resignation letter. Victoria stood up. "Drew," she said. The same tone as before. The sentence. Stopping tone. "Victoria, this conversation is over." Caldwell looked at her. The calculation in his eyes ran through several outcomes quickly. "The keynote will happen without me for 5 minutes." She looked at the maitre d'. "His dinner will not be interrupted again. Is that clear?" The maitre d' looked, genuinely relieved to have the decision made for him. "Of course, Miss Harlan. I apologize for any." "Thank you," she said. Closed. Final. Caldwell left. He didn't look at Ethan as he went. The maitre d' paused beside the table. He looked at Ethan. And then, briefly, at Lily. "The creme brulee this evening is exceptional," he said. "I'd recommend it for the young lady." Lily looked up. "Is it real creme brulee? With the sugar on top?" "Torched tableside," he said. She looked at her father with an expression that contained a very clear message. "She'll have the creme brulee," Ethan said. The maitre d' smiled, a real one. "This time," and left. Victoria didn't go back to the keynote. She sent a message from her phone, sitting at Ethan's table. And whoever received it made the adjustments necessary. These were the things that happened around people like her. The logistics that managed themselves as long as she was willing to let them. She wasn't sure when she'd decided to stay. Somewhere between Lily's direct instruction to just say sorry and the moment Caldwell had looked at the girl that particular dismissive way. "What do you do now?" she asked Ethan. He'd finished the main course. The second one hadn't come, the kitchen was backed up from the keynote preparations, and he'd declined to chase it. "Consulting," he said. "Infrastructure assessment. I do it remotely. Mostly. Some site visits when the terrain allows it." "You're still in the field." "I'm still in the field," he said. "Different parts of it." She looked at his hands again, both of them on the table now. The scarring on the left was more extensive than the first look had shown. It ran up the wrist, toward the forearm. She didn't say anything about it. "You're still good at it?" she asked. "My clients seem to think so." "Who are your clients?" "Mid-size firms, mostly. The ones that can't justify a full-time structural consultant on staff." She was quiet. "I know what you're thinking," he said. "And no, I haven't said anything. You're thinking about a position, a contract. Something with the company." He said it without sharpness. "The answer is no." She looked at him. "You don't know what I was going to offer." "I don't need to." He turned the water glass a quarter turn. I'm not looking for a debt to be repaid. I wasn't then, and I'm not now. I know that, she said. That's not why I would offer it. Mr. Harlan, Victoria, he paused, registered the correction. Victoria, he said, I have a business. It's small, and it suits me, and I'm good at it. I have a daughter who is currently planning to eat creme brulee, and I told her she could have the tableside torched version. That's a good night. She was quiet for a moment. You're not angry, she said. It came out partly as an observation, and partly as something she'd needed to determine. No, he said. Most people would be. Most people make anger a residence, he said. I lived there for a while. I moved out. She turned her glass. Mirroring, maybe. Or thinking. I've thought about what happened for 4 years, she said. Not every day, but it sits somewhere, you know. Like an open file. She paused. Seeing you tonight, I don't know what I expected. But this wasn't it. What did you expect? She thought about it honestly. I think I expected to find someone who needed something, she said. And I could provide it. And we'd both feel better. Clean transaction, he said. Yes, that's not how it works. No, she said. I can see that. Lily's dessert arrived. The waiter brought a small torch and a ramekin and lit the sugar surface with a precision that produced a thin, golden crackle. Lily watched it with the expression of someone witnessing something they are going to remember. The waiter set it before her with a small bow. She looked at it for a moment, then at her father, then at Victoria. This is the best thing I've ever seen, she said. Wait until you eat it, the waiter said, smiling. She picked up the spoon, tapped the surface once, experimentally, heard the crack. She smiled. The crooked one. Ethan watched his daughter eat creme brulee in a room full of people who had spent the evening deciding he didn't belong there. She told him what she'd found out, afterward. What the investigation had reconstructed. He'd known some of it, not all of it. The building was a mixed-use development in the third stage of a phased construction project. Harlan Meridian Group had the primary contract. The fourth-floor structural supports had used steel from a supplier whose quality certificates had been falsified, an issue that had been flagged internally by one of Harlan's mid-level engineers 3 weeks before the collapse, but the flag had been absorbed into the review process and hadn't reached anyone with authority to act in time. Ethan had been on site as a third-party consultant. Independent assessment. He'd been there to evaluate the fourth floor specifically, because the engineer who'd raised the flag had called a contact, who'd called him. He hadn't been there officially. He was there because something felt wrong to someone, and they'd called someone who would check. The evacuation had come down late in the afternoon, partial a structural monitoring alert that the site team treated as precautionary. The 2 contractors on the 4th floor, a crew finishing electrical roughing, hadn't received the radio call. Equipment interference, it turned out later. Ethan had been off-site when the partial evacuation started. He'd called in, gotten a partial picture, done the arithmetic in about 45 seconds, and gone back. He'd found the 2 men on the 4th floor. He'd gotten them to the stairwell. The second stairwell support failed while he was on the 3rd floor landing. He'd been in surgery 4 times before he stabilized. His left leg had required 3 reconstructive procedures over 14 months. The hand damage was permanent functional, but not the same. He'd never sued. He'd never filed a third-party claim against Harlan Meridian Group, which he could have, which any attorney would have told him he would have won. He hadn't told his sister why. He hadn't really told anyone. Why didn't you? Victoria asked. He was quiet for a moment. Because I went back on my own judgment, he said. No one sent me. No one asked me to. I looked at the situation, and I made a call. He paused. If that call had been wrong, if the building had been fine, I would have been a man who disrupted an evacuation procedure and wasted everyone's time. The fact that it wasn't wrong doesn't change the nature of the decision. You saved their lives, she said. I did what I assessed was necessary, he said. That's different from needing someone to be responsible for the consequence. She looked at him for a long time. That's the most infuriatingly principled thing I've ever heard, she said. Something in his face moved. Not quite a smile. An acknowledgement. My daughter says I'm annoyingly consistent, he said. Across the table, Lily was methodically finishing the crème brûlée, scraping the inside of the ramekin with the precision of someone who intends to account for every gram. She's like you, Victoria said. I know, he said. The weight in it was different from the weight of everything else he'd said. Something warmer. Victoria had her hands flat on the table again. The two men you got out, she said. Marco and a guy named Dennis. Marco is the site manager for our Portland project now. Dennis retired last year. She paused. I told Marco, about a year after the collapse, that the person who went back for them had been taken off our records. That we couldn't find him. Marco asked me just once if we'd looked hard enough. Ethan was quiet. I said yes, she said. I was lying. He turned the water glass. Once. You found me eventually, he said. By accident, she said. Most things happen by accident, he said. That doesn't make them less real. The room had thinned out slightly. The keynote had ended. People moved toward the open bar, toward the exits. The reserved table on the platform was emptying. Suits collecting coats and tablets, and the equipment of important evenings. Caldwell passed nearby with two colleagues, not looking toward their table. His body language was the body language of someone pretending a decision was his own. The moment came without any announcement. A woman from Victoria's table, her chief of operations, it turned out, a woman named Sandra Reed who had the efficient focus of someone who'd spent 20 years managing things, came to the table and crouched beside Victoria's chair. The foundation director is asking for a comment before the photographers leave, she said. And Caldwell is, she paused. He's been talking to some of the other attendees about the situation earlier. Victoria was still. What is he saying? She asked. Sandra glanced at Ethan. Just briefly. That you were embarrassing the company. That there was a man at the gala who didn't belong there, and you, his word, enabled it. The quiet that followed was the kind that has mass. Victoria looked at Ethan. He was watching her. His expression was neutral, not waiting for anything, not expecting anything. Just watching. She stood up. She said, "Tell the foundation director I'll be there in 5 minutes. Then, and ask Gerald to bring me the microphone. The floor mic. I'll make a statement before the photographers leave." Sandra's expression didn't change. She nodded. Of course. She looked at Ethan briefly. Not with Caldwell's look, but with something that might have been recognition, and walked away. Ethan said, "You don't need to do this." "I know I don't need to," she said. She straightened her jacket. "I want to. Victoria, you said that 4 years ago. In a different form. In a building with compromised supports." She looked at him directly. "You made your call. This is mine." He was quiet. She walked to the center of the room. A microphone materialized. She took it. The room settled. People turned. Conversations dropped. Because when certain people hold a microphone, attention is simply what happens. "I want to take a moment," she said, "before the evening ends." Her voice was even, professional. But there was something underneath it. Something that wasn't performance. Earlier this evening, there was an incident at one of the floor tables involving a guest and several individuals who felt the guest didn't belong here. I was one of the witnesses to that incident, and I was not sufficiently forceful in addressing it in the moment. I want to correct that now. The room was very still. Near the platform, Caldwell had stopped moving. "The man at that table," she continued, "is Ethan Cole. In 2020, during the partial collapse of the Alderton Development Project, he returned to a building under active structural failure to reach 2 workers who hadn't received the evacuation order. He was not obligated to do this. He was not on the official site team. He did it because he assessed it was necessary, and he acted on that assessment." She paused. "He was in surgery 4 times. He spent 14 months in rehabilitation. He sustained permanent injuries. The room was absolutely quiet. He never filed a claim. He never asked for anything. He continued his career with the means available to him. She looked toward his table. He came to dinner tonight with his daughter, who wanted to eat somewhere with tablecloths. A few people turned to look. At the table near the center of the room, Lily had set down her spoon. She was watching her father. "I don't have a resolution to offer," Victoria said. "I don't have a lesson about what this evening means. I'm not in the business of providing those." She looked at Caldwell, briefly, and without drama. "I'm in the business of being accurate, and the accurate statement is this. The most significant person in this room this evening arrived on crutches, ordered the duck, and sat near the kitchen, because that was the table they had." She handed back the microphone. In the resulting silence, someone began clapping. Then someone else. It built slowly, not thunderous, not performative, but genuine. The sound of a room recalibrating. Caldwell's face went through several things. Victoria walked back to the table. She sat down. Lily was looking at her father. He was looking at the tablecloth. "Dad," Lily said, very quietly. He looked up. She was watching him with an expression he recognized, the expression she got when she was filing something away permanently, when she was deciding that something was true in the lasting sense. "Are they clapping for you?" she asked. He was quiet for a moment. "I think they're clapping because they feel bad," he said carefully. "That's different. Is it good?" He thought about it. "It's okay," he said. She looked at the room. At the people who had been looking at her father a certain way an hour ago, and were now not sure where to look. "I think you deserve more than okay," she said. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. "I've got what I need," he said. They stayed until the room had mostly emptied. Not because they were making a point, because Lily had been promised a second creme brulee, and the waiter, whose name turned out to be Marcus, had produced it with the care of a man who had witnessed the evening, and decided this was something he could do. Victoria sat with them. She'd made 2 calls, from the table, both brief. She'd answered 2 messages. After that, she'd put her phone face down and left it there, which Ethan suspected was unusual for her. "What I said earlier," she said. "About a position, I want to be clear about what I actually meant. You don't have to. I know I don't have to." She'd said this several times now, and each time it was true. "I meant that I'm aware of your firm. I looked into it. After the first time I tried to find you, and couldn't. I know what you do, and I know you're good at it. If at any point you were interested in Harlan Meridian Group as a client, not a benefactor, not a patron, a client, I'd like to have that conversation." He was quiet. "On your terms," she said. "At your rate. In writing before any agreement is made." He looked at the table. "My current project load is—" "I know you're not sitting idle," she said. "I'm not asking for immediacy. I'm asking for the option. A pause. You can send a letter to my office," he said. "Standard procurement channel. My assistant screens them." "You have an assistant?" "Part-time. She's 17. She's Lily's babysitter's older sister." Lily looked up from her dessert. "Rebecca is very organized," she said. "She color codes." "That's good to know," Victoria said. Ethan looked at her. "If the letter goes through proper channels and the scope of work is appropriate, it'll get a response. That's the most I can say. That's all I'm asking," she said. He nodded. "A small one. It wasn't forgiveness, and it wasn't reconciliation, and it wasn't resolution. It was 2 people who had been in the same catastrophe from different angles, finding a way to occupy the same room without either of them pretending the catastrophe hadn't happened." Sandra appeared at the edge of the table. "Car's ready when you are." Victoria looked at Ethan, at Lily, who had finished the second creme brulee and was now very quietly reorganizing the silverware on the table into a parallel arrangement. "It was good to find you," she said. "Yes," he said. He said it simply, without layering too much onto it. She stood, paused. "I'm going to tell Marco," she said. He looked at her. "That we found you," she said. "That you're all right. He'll want to know." A pause. "Okay," he said. She left. Sandra followed. The car, presumably, was waiting somewhere in the city outside. in the kind of evening that doesn't know anything about the rooms it surrounds. The room was almost empty. A few tables still occupied, late conversations, the slow dissolution of an event into an ordinary night. Marcus came by with the bill. He set it down gently. Then he said, "Dessert was compliments of the restaurant." Both of them. Ethan looked up. "I didn't. The maitre d's call," Marcus said. "Not mine to explain." He looked at Lily. "I hope you enjoyed it." "Very much," Lily said, with the gravity of a small person who understands that some things should be met with the right weight. Marcus nodded. Took the empty ramekins. Moved away with the quiet efficiency of someone who had decided his role in the evening and played it well. Ethan looked at the bill. He paid it. The full amount dinner for two, first course, main, the non-complimentary drinks, the single glass of wine he'd had with the main course. He left a tip that was precise and fair, and wrote Marcus in the note field so it was clear. Then he looked at his daughter. She was watching him. She'd been watching him for the last hour in the particular way she watched him, sometimes not with worry, but with the sustained attention of someone studying a thing they're trying to understand fully. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Then, "Dad?" "Yeah. I'm glad we came." He looked at her for a moment. The crooked smile was on her face again, the one that started on one side and the other followed. "Me too," he said. He helped her with her coat. He retrieved his crutches from the edge of the table. The rubber tips on the marble floor, very small sound, barely audible over the ambient quiet of a nearly empty room. They walked out together. She didn't hold his hand in the lobby. She was too old for that. But when they got to the door, she walked just close enough that their arms were touching. Not holding on. Just present. The city was cold tonight, with the specific clean chill of early spring, the kind that smelled like wet stone and distance. He held the door for her. She walked through. Outside, the valet station was occupied with a line of dark cars. Somewhere in that line was probably Victoria's car. He didn't look. They walked to the bus stop at the corner. Lily sat down on the bench. She was still wearing her good dress. She crossed her ankles the way she'd been practicing. She'd read that was the proper way to sit in formal clothes, and looked up at the street. He stood beside her. He rested one crutch against the bench and stretched his left leg slightly. A habit. The joint needed it after a long evening of sitting on inadequate chairs. "Are you tired?" she asked. "A little," he said. "Are you?" "No." She paused. "I'm thinking." "About what?" She considered. "About how you knew her." The real version, not the knew someone who knew her version. He was quiet. "You didn't want to tell me at first," she said. "In case she was still just someone who used to know you, in case it was nothing." He looked at her. "How do you figure that?" "Because you said the other thing instead," she said. "You hedge when you're not sure what something is yet." He stood there for a moment. The bus hadn't come yet. Down the block, the hotel lights were still fully lit. The quiet industry of an event that would go on a little while longer without them. "That's accurate," he said. "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "She's going to send the letter. Probably. Are you going to take the work?" He thought about it. Honestly, the way he owed her. "I don't know yet," he said. "If the scope is right." "What's the right scope?" "Work I'd take from anyone," he said. "Not work I'd only take because of the history." She considered this. "That makes sense," she said. "You don't want to be a debt. You want to be a consultant." "Yes," he said. She nodded, filing it. The bus came. He helped her board. She didn't need it. But she let him. Which she only did when she understood it was as much for him as for her. They found seats near the middle. She leaned slightly against his arm. She was asleep before they'd gone 6 blocks. He held her upright gently with his shoulder. The city moved past the windows. Lit windows, dark stretches. The ordinary geography of a place that didn't know it had been the backdrop for anything. He thought about the room, about the way the clapping had built, not thunderous, the way these things go in stories, but slow and uncertain, the sound of people who weren't sure what they felt but felt something, and made the gesture anyway. He thought about Lily's face. about the creme brulee and the tableside torch and the thin golden crack of sugar under a spoon. He thought about Marco, in Portland, who would get a call. He rested his head back against the seat. He pushed open the door. The city was there, dark and lit and ordinary and indifferent, the way cities are, the way the world is when it isn't doing anything particular to you. He didn't need them to see his worth. He only needed his daughter to know it. She already did.